I have always believed that inside every human being lies an invisible force, an untapped reservoir of power that can transform an ordinary life into an extraordinary one. I did not always know this truth. There were times when I felt small, helpless, and lost in a world that seemed too big, too demanding, too indifferent to my dreams. But deep within me, something kept whispering that I was born for more. I remember the first time I truly heard that whisper. I was sitting alone in a cold, dimly lit room. My pockets were empty, my mind was crowded with debts and doubts. I felt like the world was closing in on me, mocking my ambitions, daring me to give up. And for a brief moment, I almost did. I almost surrendered to the temptation of blaming fate, my family, the economy, anything but myself. But then, in the silence of that hopeless night, I asked myself a question that would change the course of my entire life. What if I am more powerful than I think? That question cracked open a door inside my mind. Through that crack, light began to pour in. The light of new ideas, new beliefs, and a new version of myself that I had buried under years of excuses and fear. I began to study men who had changed the world with nothing but the power of their minds. Men like Thomas Edison, who failed 1,000 times, yet invented the light bulb that now illuminated my dark room. Men like Henry Ford, who turned a simple dream into an empire. And of course, the man whose teachings would later guide every decision I made, Napoleon Hill. Hill taught me that thoughts are things, real things, vibrating with energy, shaping reality. I read those words over and over until they became etched into my soul. I realized that my mind was not just a place where random thoughts passed like clouds in the sky. My mind was a workshop, a laboratory, a sacred temple where my future was forged. The invisible power within me was my ability to choose my thoughts. That was my first and greatest discovery. I was not a victim of my thoughts. I was their master. So I began to experiment. Each morning, instead of waking up dreading the day, I forced myself to think of one thing I was grateful for. Some days, it was as simple as the warmth of my blanket or the sound of birds outside my window. Other days, I struggled to find anything, but I still tried. Gratitude became the key that unlocked more and more of that invisible power. Next, I replaced my constant self-criticism with new affirmations. I told myself, I am capable, I am worthy, I am enough. At first, it felt fake, like I was lying to myself. But day by day, those words sank deeper, weaving new patterns into my subconscious mind. Slowly, I noticed changes. I stood taller. I spoke with more confidence. When I failed, and I failed often, I did not retreat back into that cold, hopeless room in my mind. Instead, I asked myself, what can I learn from this? And how does this failure serve me? These questions turned every setback into fuel. I began to see my mind as a garden. Every thought was a seed. If I planted seeds of fear and doubt, I would reap a harvest of disappointment. If I planted seeds of faith, courage, and creativity, I would reap a life I could be proud of. The greatest lesson I learned was this: no one could do this work for me. No teacher, no mentor, no friend could reach inside my mind and plant those seeds for me. The invisible power was mine alone to cultivate. I remember one morning, waking up before dawn. I had been up all night working on an idea that everyone said would fail. My eyes were tired, but my spirit was alive. I stepped outside to breathe in the crisp air. The world was silent. The stars were still out, reminding me that there was so much more beyond what I could see. I whispered to myself, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. The words tasted powerful on my tongue. In that moment, I knew, truly knew, that no matter what happened, I would never go back to the person who waited for someone else to rescue him. That old version of me died the day I accepted that the power to change my life had been within me all along. It did not matter where I was born, how poor I was, or what mistakes I had made. What mattered was what I chose to think and do today. As I stand here now, sharing this with you, I feel that same invisible power flowing through my veins. I still have fears. I still have days when doubt knocks at my door, but I no longer answer. Instead, I sit with my thoughts like a gardener tending his crops, pulling the weeds, watering the good seeds, protecting the fragile sprouts of new dreams. People ask me, "What is your secret? How did you turn your life around?" I tell them, there is no secret except this. The power you seek is already inside you. It is the voice that whispers to you when you are alone in the dark. It is the idea that keeps you awake at night. It is the vision that makes your heart race with excitement and terror at the same time. Most people ignore that voice. They silence it with distractions, excuses, and the noise of the world. But those who listen, truly listen, discover what I discovered: that the invisible power within us is stronger than any obstacle outside us. Today, I live by one simple rule: guard your mind like a fortress. Do not let negative thoughts sneak in like thieves in the night. Feed your mind with the food of great books, inspiring people, and bold ideas. If you do this, you will wake up one day and realize that you have become the person you once dreamed of being. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Every morning when I open my eyes, I remind myself, I am not here to survive. I am here to create. I am here to lead. I am here to love. I am here to grow. That is the invisible power within me and within you. It is waiting for you to claim it, to use it, to build a life so full of purpose that even your failures become stepping stones to greatness. So tonight, when you find yourself alone with your thoughts, ask yourself the same question I once asked. What if I am more powerful than I think? And then do not just wonder, prove it. Fear and doubt. These two shadows haunted me for most of my life. They crept into my mind in the quietest moments, whispering lies that felt so real, I often mistook them for truth. They told me I wasn't good enough, that my dreams were foolish, that my ideas would fail and that I would fail with them. In the beginning, I believed them. Why wouldn't I? I grew up hearing those same doubts, echoed by people I trusted. Family members who told me to be realistic. Teachers who said I should lower my expectations. Friends who mocked my ambitions when they didn't match the ordinary path they chose for themselves. Fear and doubt, I learned, are not monsters that suddenly appear in our adult lives. They are planted in us when we are young. And if we do not uproot them, they grow roots so deep, they choke every dream we dare to plant in their soil. The first time I faced my fears, I did not even realize that was what I was doing. I just knew I was tired. Tired of feeling small. Tired of hiding my ideas. Tired of staying silent when I knew I had something to say. So I did something that terrified me. I stood up in a room full of people and spoke. My voice trembled. My hands shook. My heart raced so fast I thought I might faint. But when it was over, I felt something shift inside me. A crack in the wall of fear that had held me prisoner for so long. That small act of courage taught me a priceless lesson. Fear loses its power the moment you face it head-on. From that day on, I became obsessed with studying my own fears. I wrote them down. I named them. I asked myself, what am I really afraid of? And more importantly, what proof do I have that this fear is true? Most of the time, I found no proof at all. My fears were ghosts, illusions with no substance. But they fed on my inaction. As long as I stayed still, they grew stronger. When I moved, even a single step forward, they shrank. Doubt, I learned, is fear's cunning cousin. Where fear shouts, doubt whispers. Doubt is subtle. It disguises itself as logic, reason, caution. It says, maybe later. Maybe you're not ready yet. Maybe someone else should do it instead. Doubt is clever because it sounds responsible. It sounds smart. But deep down, doubt is just fear wearing a suit and tie, trying to convince you to abandon your dreams in favor of safety. I discovered that the cure for doubt is not more thinking. It is action. Action is the enemy of doubt. The moment you act, you gather evidence that your doubt is lying to you. When I started my first, I also learned to choose my company wisely. Fear and doubt thrive in negative environments, among complainers, pessimists, people who hate change. I used to spend hours with people who fed my fears without realizing it. They talked about how impossible it was to succeed, how the world was rigged against us, how we should just settle for what we had. One day, I made a decision that broke my heart but saved my future. I let go of people who drained my courage. I did not hate them. I did not judge them. But I knew I could not conquer my own fears while surrounded by theirs. Instead, I sought out people who believed in possibility. I read biographies of dreamers and doers. I listened to voices that said, "Yes, you can." Even when no one around me spoke those words, I found them in books, in recordings, in the pages of Napoleon Hill's wisdom. One of Hill's teachings that changed my life forever was this: what the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. The first time I read that, I thought it sounded nice, poetic even. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized how dangerous it was to my old fears. If it were true, if I could really achieve what I could conceive and believe, then fear and doubt were exposed for what they truly were: thieves that stole my future before I ever had the chance to live it. So I began to feed my mind with new beliefs. I created a simple ritual. Every night before I fell asleep, I pictured myself already living the life I dreamed of. I did not just see it, I felt it. I felt the pride of success, the freedom of wealth, the peace of mind that came from knowing I was fulfilling my purpose. In the beginning, my old fears fought back hard. They told me I was silly, naive, foolish to believe I could break free from my past. But night after night, my vision grew stronger than their voices. Then came the tests. Moments when I had to prove to myself that my new beliefs were real. Opportunities that looked scary because they demanded that I risk failure. Invitations to speak in front of bigger crowds, pitch ideas to powerful people, invest money I could not afford to lose. Each time my fear said, "Don't do it." Each time my doubt said, "What if you're wrong?" And each time I chose to act anyway. It did not always go perfectly. I stumbled, I embarrassed myself, I made mistakes that cost me money and sleep. But with every act of courage, I built new evidence that fear and doubt were not my masters. They were my fuel. One night, when I was particularly discouraged after a big setback, I opened my notebook and wrote down every fear I still had. The list was long. Fear of poverty, fear of embarrassment, fear of rejection, fear of losing people I loved. When I was done, I looked at the list and asked myself, if I knew for certain that I would die tomorrow, which of these fears would matter? The answer was clear: none of them. If tomorrow was my last day on earth, I would not waste a second worrying about failure or rejection. I would spend every moment living boldly, loving deeply, and doing the things that truly mattered. In that moment, I understood something so simple yet so powerful. Fear and doubt are illusions that only have power if I give it to them. They only exist in the future, a future I am free to shape however I choose. From that night on, whenever fear or doubt knocked on my door, I asked myself, if this were my last day, would I care? Most of the time, the answer is no. And with that answer, courage takes their place. I do not pretend that I no longer feel fear. I still feel it, sometimes more than ever. But now I see fear as a compass. If something scares me, it usually means I must do it. My greatest growth has always come from stepping directly into what I fear the most. Doubt still whispers, too, but I do not argue with it anymore. I do not waste time convincing it to leave me alone. Instead, I act, and in action, doubt disappears. If there is one thing I hope you take from my story, it is this. Fear and doubt are not your enemies to fight, they are your teachers. They show you exactly where you need to grow. Whenever you feel fear, ask, what lesson is hiding here? Whenever you feel doubt, ask, what action can I take right now to prove this wrong? This is how I continue to conquer fear and doubt every single day. Not by pretending they do not exist, but by daring to move forward in spite of them. So when you hear those same voices telling you that you can't, that you shouldn't, that you are not enough, remember this. You do not need to silence them. You just need to outgrow them. And the only way to outgrow them is to act.